Hi, my name's Cheese, and welcome to another Fossil Sweeper Progress Update video. If you haven't heard of the project before, you can find an overview here, but the TLDR is, it's like Minesweeper, but you're digging up fossils, and you need to build skeletons out of the stuff that you find. Over the past month or so, I've been working on some UI and UX tweaks, and also implemented a setting for toggling chat integration for each phase independently. Since it's been about 3 years or so since I started working on this project, I thought now might be a good time to take a look at the past year's worth of development and reflect on what's to come before we dive into more recent work. The dig phase received a number of changes in 2024. The one that I think will have the biggest impact on the game's identity is non-square dig sites. After a little iteration, I came up with a simple system that generates a couple of convex potato shapes, joins them together in a way that guarantees no islands, and expands them a little to round external corners and smooth internal corners. The results feel organic in a fun way, and reduce the occurrences of straight axis-aligned edges, which I think in general are less interesting than curved or lumpy sides. The actual impact is subtle, I think, but the perceived impact is higher. It's a visible point of difference from traditional Minesweeper games that I hope will play a role in inviting people to consider that Fossil Sweeper might be doing something interesting and take a closer look. All that said, if you're a fan of square puzzles, don't worry, there's a setting. Dig environments also got an overhaul, and instead of being a block of dirt floating in the void, are now landscapes that suggest horizons and mountains and oceans. I wrote a height map shader that uses the red channel for height, blue channel for water, and green channel for environment-specific ground variation, and my initial placeholders are doing a passable job of conveying the types of spaces that they're meant to be. While working on environments, I experimented with some simpler grass meshes, which generally speaking look better but aren't placed appropriately for the new height maps and so don't currently feel like they fit in. With non-square dig sites implemented, I took time to revisit avatar pathing, making their walking more closely follow the perimeter of the dig site. There's more that I want to do, but for now they feel a lot more present in the world than before, and it fixes some of the corner case bugs with corners where avatars would sometimes walk across the play space from time to time. Another tweak I made to dig site presentation was to recess the diggable tiles slightly below the ground, and make the tile caps a different colour. This helps the edges of the diggable area be a lot more readable, and it also suggests that the dirt and rocks that aren't a part of the formation being excavated, or the overburden, has been removed, which is one of the first steps in real-world dig sites. During one of my weekly dev streams, a supporter requested a feature where using a flag action on a dug tile with all adjacent non-fossil tiles also dug would flag the remaining adjacent tiles as a single action. At first I was worried that this would lead players towards clicking randomly instead of considering the clues that have been revealed, undermining the gameplay itself, but having implemented it and played a bit, I've warmed to the idea and currently have the setting enabled by default. In the assembly phase, I worked on re-enabling size variation, carrying that information forward from the skeleton in the player's inventory, through the assembly phase, and into the museum. I've got a placeholder size frequency table that makes big specimens very rare, small specimens less rare, suggesting juveniles, babies and nests will be covered by rare specimens when they get implemented, and normal size specimens be the most common. I want to do some research to make sure that the understanding I'm basing that on doesn't go against the kind of frequencies that we find in real-world specimens in general, but for now it feels good, or at least as good as the mechanical framing of how many individuals die before or after their prime can feel. I fixed a very long-standing cosmetic bug in the map phase where visiting a dig site at the current location would cause the large travel dot to be misaligned on screen. I'd gotten so used to seeing it every time I played the game that it is now exciting for me every time I see it behaving properly. The saved travel lines now also account for resolution, so they don't get weird when revisiting a dig site after switching between windowed and full screen. Building on work I'd done at the end of 2023, I continued to iterate on the museum phase's editing interfaces, adding keyboard and gamepad support, and finally moving away from character-bound third-person cameras. It's not as personal or as intimate as things were in the earliest versions of the game, but I think this makes for a better experience. placement mechanics also got an overhaul, and I added wall and ceiling placement for a couple of items, including informational displays and the new dynamic lights that I made last year. Alongside that, I enabled snapping by default, the camera now zooms in when editing the skeletons on a mount, and the buttons for actions available now change depending upon editor state. All of these things make it feel a bit more structured in a way that I think makes it easier to work with. The skeleton scaling work that I'd done for the assembly phase has helped me get a better feel for how much variation I can get out of a single skeleton in the museum once size, pose, and fossil materials from different dig sites are taken into account, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. It's also exciting to finish building a really big or really small skeleton and pop it inside your museum and have it stand out. I spent some time experimenting with asset creation workflows for final character customization and exploring the level of fidelity that I want to have for the map phase's continents, but neither have made it into the game as yet. Around the middle of the year, I received final music tracks and masters from Peter, including a credits song that we collaborated on, with vocals by the same vocalist we worked with on Hive Time's Being Together track. That's an exciting milestone, and Peter has done a fantastic job with the entire soundtrack. We recorded a nice long chat about his work, which you can find a shortened cut of in the Update 26 video, and a longer cut of over on Patreon. I also made a start on chat integration, adding initial chat commands for the dig, assembly, and map phases. For the dig phase, I implemented a grid UI that stays visible and aligned to tiles regardless of the camera's tilt and zoom. And to work with the assembly phase's real-time nature, I implemented a staged flow where chat participants move a chunk's icon around before confirming their suggestion. Chat commands go into a queue where players can accept or reject them, and I've also added a setting to them that allows them to be auto-processed on a timeout without player input, allowing the game to be played without a player at all if somebody's excited about running that kind of thing. Looking ahead, there's still a bit of work to do, including some items I had planned for last year but didn't get to, such as finalising the look and feel of fossils and specimens, finalising character customization, museum room material customization, and implementing rare specimen dig sites. My short-term goals are to wrap up the current chat integration work before starting on a GUI revamp aimed at creating a consistent look and iconography for the game. I also want to refine dig site backgrounds further and add final content assets for the map phase. Since the game is beginning to more visibly reflect its final form, I'm going to be migrating devlogs over to itch as part of increasing the project's visibility ahead of starting on marketing efforts. I feel like I'm getting close to a point where my focus will shift from implementation to content, and I think that'll be a bit of a tipping point where progress will be a lot more clear and visible. This is the home stretch, and I'm earnestly intending to finish the game's development phase in 2025. To reduce the possibility of misclicking near a tile edge, I now increase the size of the collider for the current tile, making it take more deliberate effort to move on to the next tile. I also leave the current tile's collider raised when digging until mousing over a different tile so that the cursor can't sometimes fall onto the next tile if the cursor is higher than the collider's lowered position. I'd only seen misclicks caused by these cases a couple of times when watching testers, and haven't had anybody explicitly complain about them, but they are friction points and they were relatively simple to alleviate. I spent some time in the first half of February trying to track down some performance bottlenecks that occur on larger dig sites, causing footstep sounds to intermittently be played at full volume, but I haven't managed to track that down just yet. It generally happens when I'm streaming and I use GPU encoding, so I'm suspecting something on that front at the moment. While doing some chat integration work, I fixed the dig site marker positions on the map phase not updating during travel line animations, and updated the chat labels to be hidden once a selection is made. These aren't particularly noteworthy changes on their own, but they fit this theme of minor cosmetic and UI tweaks for the past month or so. When playing in practice mode, the game would wait the duration of the normal transition back to the map phase before returning to the main menu. This made it difficult to know if a click had been processed, so I added a new transition animation to the phase end UI, exiting at the top and bottom of the screen, giving feedback and making that wait time feel shorter because something is happening. While doing that, I noticed that the phase end entering animation was starting partially on screen with the wrong offset, so I fixed that too. To give players more control over how chat integration functions, I added a setting for allowing chat integration to be toggled for each phase independently. I put together some placeholder phase icons, which I'll eventually use to replace text buttons as I progress towards that UI revamp I mentioned earlier. A very big thank you to the supporters going by on screen at the moment. Their support has helped me eat while making this game, and I am so very appreciative. A huge thanks also to Screen Tasmania, who supported this project with a small grant. Anyway, that's about it for today. If you'd like to keep track of development or try the playable prototype, you can find some links in the description. And if you're super keen to check out what we talked about here today, I make early test builds available to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye!